All right, how's it going, everybody? My name's Antonio, and I'm on the barbecue on December 11 with Matt Schwab, CEO of Kraken Energy, a uranium exploration company with assets in Nevada and Utah. Who's not here with us today, though, is your financial advisor. This conversation is not going to include any recommendations to buy or sell anything. Instead, it will be just a talk, a casual, general, and impersonal talk between two people on the internet. And if you haven't been burned yet, you're not supposed to blindly trust people on the internet. Do not use this conversation as independent research because it is going to include a lot of forward-looking statements about uncertain events that may or may not happen in the future. And also because the exploration space is one of the toughest places to profitably deploy capital in because of the oversized risk on top of your general investment risk, but also geological risk and whatnot, which means that it is your responsibility to head over to setterplus.ca and read the company's official filings, as well as consult a professional investment advisor before taking your own decision in the end. That all said, Kraken Energy is listed on the CSE under the ticker symbol UUSA, where an average of about 160,000 shares trade each day, with a 52-week high of about 50 cents and a 52-week low of about 20 cents. With a market cap of about 13 million Canadian dollars right now and about 54 million shares outstanding today, this is a 24.5-cent stock. And there, by the way, are also about 4 million stock options and no warrants. So the fully diluted number of shares is somewhere in the 60 million. About 22% of the company is owned by management and directors. 7% is in the hands of institutional investors. 11% is owned by high net worth individuals. And thus for about 60%, which would be give or take 30 million shares, are in the hands of retail investors. As of the end of the third quarter this year, the company had about $4 million in cash and some prepaid expenses for a total amount in current assets of a little over $4.5 million. That's against current liabilities of, basically nothing. It's about $200,000, constituting mostly of account payables. As I said at the beginning, Kraken has a few uranium projects in the U.S., 4 to be specific. Those projects are Harts Point. This one is in Utah, and then they have 3 in Nevada. That'd be Apex, Garfield, and Huber. Again, they're all in Nevada. The project that is currently being drilled is the Apex project in Nevada. This is actually this is one of the company's main project. It's actually a past producing mine. It's the largest it's the state's largest past producing mine, I believe, that produced at an average grade of about 0.25% of U3O8, which right now at $80 uranium would be about 400, let's maybe say $450 worth of metal in a ton of rock. Of course, those are historical grades, so the company still to confirm all that themselves. Last time uranium came out of the mine, though, was in the 1960s, as the mine was found in 53 and operated between 54 and 66. And it was a small open pit as well as an underground operation with coincidentally, all of the ore being mined here, by the way, was getting shipped to Utah for processing and also production of actual yellow cake. But anyway, since then, drilling was done in the 70s, I believe, but that didn't amount to much, and Kraken is now trying something else. They actually started drilling just about a month ago, and they're going for a 2200, so a relatively small drill program. This is the initial drill program for this company, targeted at 2 areas that are immediately along strike from the historical workings. And so they have the license for 24 holes. Again, that's 2,200 meters and 24 holes. So those are relatively shallow holes from a total of 8 drilling pads. Now, the mine itself had a relatively small footprint at surface, but the company now has a piece of ground that is about 10 kilometers wide and 17 kilometers long, with an almost 15 kilometers long strike length. That sounds weird. I should have said it differently. Anyways, Garfield Hills is another asset where the company drilled 11 holes between 2022 and 2023 in their phase 1 drilling program for a total of about 1,700 meters. This project lies north of Apex, and it lies south of Apex. Southwest of Apex, and the other one is north, and it covers about 1,200 hectares, and Kraken has the option to acquire 100% of it for a $150,000 cash payment, 250,000 shares, and a 2% net smelter royalty. As far as I understand it, a phase 3 drill program has not yet been planned for Garfield, but there are 5 new targets here after this summer's drilling. And then I was talking about the north. That would be the third Nevada project. It's called the Huber Hills. It is in northern Nevada. It's also a smaller project, so it is give or take 5 by 4 kilometers. But it is 100% owned by Kraken, given that they got it by staking at the beginning of the year. What's notable here is that this project houses the historic racetrack open pit uranium mine, which also produced during the uranium boom, if you will, of the 50s and the 60s in the U.S. And it also had about the same average grade as Apex of about 0.24% of U3O8. No drilling yet by Kraken, as far as I understand it. No specific plans for drilling here either, although the presentation does say 2024, so I hope Matt will tell me more about that here in a minute. And then last but not least, over in Utah, about 65 kilometers north of the White Mesa Mill. Now, the company's 4 project is called Harts Point. This is not a past-producing mine, but it is in the middle of a past-producing district that also operated during that uranium boom that I told you about in the U.S. There's multiple operations producing uranium here in the 50s at average grades between, give or take, your typical grades that you would expect for that region of the world. So that's 0.2 to 0.4% of E3 or E. This project is permitted for 20 drill holes, and Kraken had hoped to put those down this year. They started drilling in the summer, but they were asked to pause in August by the Bureau of Land Management, and has, to my knowledge, not been restarted yet. But again, I'm also hoping for an update here as well. So you may already be seeing a pattern here. These projects are in a similar geological and geographical setting too, and they're not too far off from each other. That's what I'm trying to say, which fits within the company's strategy to find and define uranium projects that don't necessarily need their own mill, but can be, rather used as feeders for a central processing facility, and they call it the hub and spoke model. Interesting strategy, to say the least. 4 projects, enough to talk about. So this might be a good time for me to start thinking about shutting up and welcoming the CEO. So Matt, thank you for investing your time with me, sir.
Thank you very much for your time today. That was a great overview, Antonio. It's great to be here today. And you're right. One of the key things that we focus on in bringing together projects into our company is focusing on that brownfields aspect. We're really looking for projects that were kicked off in the 1950s and 60s and shut down before meeting their prime. Being past producers in Nevada, we're looking at projects that have existing reserves in place, non-compliant, but existing reserves in place with advanced infrastructure so that we can really focus on using those parts of the properties and the projects to fast track them to being in a production ready state much sooner than we could looking at greenfields exploration. On top of that, it also minimizes the risk and maximizes shareholder value because we're not trying to make a greenfields discovery. We're looking to build on the work that was done before us and really move forward in a quicker fashion.
I find that hub and spoke production and then transporting that to a central processing facility strategy, and an interesting one specifically because from a helicopter view, it looks simple, straightforward, clear strategy that is also low, or well, let's not say low, but lower on the capex side as well on an individual project basis. But of course, as a geologist yourself, you know that what's on the surface is not always indicative of what's underground. So why hasn't anybody beat you to it? I mean, why are the past producing mines not in operation today?
Honestly, these projects across the southern United States have been ignored for 60 to 70 years. When the AEC, or the Atomic Energy Commission, took away the incentives for discovery and production of uranium in the U.S. back at the end of the 1950s, these projects were more or less shut down or abandoned overnight. Again, with those reserves and infrastructure in place. And as at that time, discoveries were also being made in the Athabasca Basin with double-digit grades, and it really just took the investment focus away from the United States, and it stayed that way for a long, long time. So we found ourselves in this situation where we were very lucky to be able to go through and cherry pick through these forgotten deposits and projects to really build up the portfolio that we have now.
But what about community support? That's the first thing that popped up in my mind, because indigenous peoples in the U.S. in general are not always happy with how they've been treated in the past. I know that's specifically a thing of the South, maybe, of the U.S. But how are you finding talking to the indigenous peoples in the region today?
That's a very important point. And yes, we've been very selective in the jurisdictions that we've picked up assets in. Primarily focusing on Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah as our main areas of focus. There is a long-standing history, especially in New Mexico, some parts of Utah, Colorado, where past operators did leave behind a legacy of terrible operations. we're trying to get ahead of that. And personally, I insist on visiting all of the communities that we operate in or around. And I've been surprised by the outstanding support of those communities. They can look past the previous operators' misgivings and look at the potential of us helping to build up the local economies as we move forward with our projects. So the support has been overwhelming, to be quite honest. One thing that we're doing is taking the environmental standards that were developed in the Athabasca Basin, which I would say are probably the most stringent on the planet because of the grades that are operated with in the Athabasca Basin, and we're applying those to all of our operations in the United States to make sure that we're approaching these properties and these projects as best as possible right out of the gates, so that we avoid future issues downstream.
Hmm. As far as I understand it, though, you don't technically need therapy. Like it's not in Canada where you cannot even start doing anything before the locals sign off. Is that right?
It depends on the land standing that you're in. So the U.S. has both U.S. Forest Service ground and BLM, Bureau of Land Management ground. Bureau of Land Management ground, no, it goes straight through the government regulators. They issue your permits and approve them. On U.S. Forest Service ground, though, you do go through a different permitting procedure. So we have a bit of a mix on our properties in both Nevada and Utah.
Right, but I
Where
mean,
U.S. Forest Service ground, you do need to consult communities and the local tribes.
oh, okay, that's what I was asking. So you still have to go in, talk to the natives, and figure it out together with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay. And so how's that permitting process in it been, by the way? I mean, sure, you got the permit for Apex now. It was well, it was not technically delayed, but it took a while, right? And you've also had to pause the drill program, as I mentioned, because of the Bureau of Land Management wanted you to in Utah. And all the other projects that what I noticed is that you have like you get when you get a permission on one of the four projects, you get a permission for a certain number of holes. It's not all that many. So it doesn't look like it's easy to permit here, or not as easy as it might be in Africa or even in the basin. So looking forward into 2024 maybe and beyond, how are you approaching the permitting process as a whole?
So I'll start with the permitting process for BLM ground. BLM ground is actually quite straightforward. You submit what's called a notice of intent for drilling. And the two that we did apply for, three, we were approved in 16 days, in 14 days, and in 15 days for those permits. Yes, the one at Harts Point, they did ask us to pause drilling and reevaluate some environmental concerns, preceding us. But the other two, they were straightforward. We moved right through, paid our bond, and got into operations. And it's quite straightforward. It's the same thing time after time. U.S. Forest Service ground is a bit trickier. It requires what's called a plan of operations, where you have to go through certain environmental benchmarking studies, so botany, archaeological, wildlife surveys, to make sure that you can track your progress through the project, make sure that you're not altering anything in a detrimental way. And I agree with that. It makes sense considering that you're not out in the middle of the desert with, on the BLM ground where there are very minimal vegetation factors, there are very minimal wildlife factors. So it's an important point, an important process we have to go through. Yes, it does take longer on the U.S. Forest Service ground. So, for example, on Apex, it's split between BLM and U.S. Forest Service ground. So we actually have to apply for two permits on different parts of the property to move forward. And we just kind of leapfrog that, if that makes sense, where we'll permit one side, start drilling, continue permitting the opposite side, and move forward, kind of staging them back and forth.
Mm. When do you think you're going to be able to start drilling again in Utah?
In Utah, actually, we're waiting on an approval right now. We submitted the amended NOI, I want to say 3 days ago, end of last week, and we expect a response within 14 days of that. So we could be operational in Utah again, but before the second week of January.
Okay. That's year-round drilling because I believe that's one of your criteria for picking assets, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Is it costing you any money though, the slowdown or just submitting those permit
Very
asking for those
minimal.
permits basically?
No, very minimal. We have a very versatile drilling contractor who just decided to take the deposit from one property and move it to the next, slide over to Nevada, kick off that property. And once we get the approval on Harts Point, they'll do the same thing and move right back over to Utah for us. Besides that, like I said, it's very minimal on just the administrative costs to amend and reapply with the NOIs.
And how are you finding that permit process, like personally? Because again, you've worked before in well, mostly in Canada, so you've worked on um Hathor's project that's out what in 2006 ish. Then you worked on Next Gen's Arrow deposit and so on. Like the permitting in the basin is relatively straightforward. It's not easy, but it is relatively straightforward. They have that framework ready because there's a lot of uranium exploration activities going on. As you mentioned earlier, not so much in the US. So how is that process, permitting process dated? Would you like it to be updated? How are you finding it personally?
Actually, I find that we're kind of breaking new ground with uranium permitting in the United States. A lot of the questions that are being posed are because of the information that we're providing in our permit applications. Not a lot of uranium exploration has been done again in the last 60, 70 years in southwestern United States. So because we're taking the initiative and providing the information in the permitting stage, we're really shortcutting that, I think, making it easier on the regulators, and I think it's going to benefit us in the long run.
Hmm. All right. All right. What kind of, it might sound like a weird question, but I recently had experience with that. What kind of animals do you have in Utah on that? I mean, in that part of Utah, is it like a endangered mosquito type of thing that I have to worry about?
Not so much. The biggest concerns are local grouse, mule deer, and occasionally owls. But we're
Hmm.
trying our best to stick away from any kind of critical habitat to make sure we minimize permitting delays and maximize production for the programs.
Hmm. Owls are kind of nice. Most people don't know that ravens are actually smarter than owls, but I still like owls. No, the Apex mine was recently sealed though. Is that not maybe somewhat of a testament or something that the government or to the government's willingness to open up for uranium mining in the US again? How do you look at that?
I think they're very supportive of it. The Biden administration has been broadly supportive of exploration, especially for critical minerals across the board. We could see a swing in that for sure, depending on the upcoming election next year. But for the time being, they are supportive. They understand the growing need and the deficit for uranium, especially in the United States. The US is probably one of the most drastic examples of that deficit, where they require anywhere from 45 to 65 million pounds per year. And as of the last statistics in 2021, they only produced 5,000 pounds. So the US government is seeing the writing on the wall, from what I can see, and they should be taking more aggressive steps in the future to address more aggressive production.
Right. Well, I agree. They should, and it's logical. I just wish that politicians would always do what's logical, which unfortunately is not the case. And you're
Unfortunately.
reminding me of the Biden administration. What happened recently was that this summer, towards the end of the summer, that they closed off that, a huge land package around Grand Canyon as a national monument, and that potentially influences uranium. Some potential and emphasis on potential here, some potential uranium operations there. Um, so that's why I'm asking about their willingness and what you've personally experienced. Like, what makes you confident to say that they are willing or looking to expand uranium operations?
Because sooner or later, they're not going to have a choice. Quite honestly, wind and solar cannot provide the baseload power required for the growing demands of the nation. And with other countries around the world very aggressively signing long-term contracts for uranium supply, being China for the most part, they're locking up contracts with Cameco, with Kazatomprom. The big players in the industry are sooner or later not going to be an option to supply uranium to the United States.
Hmm.
And they're going to be caught in a position where energy security is going to be a very huge risk. So whether or not they've already realized it, they're going to have to soon.
Hmm. Yeah, that's probably true for a lot of other operations. Not only uranium, but uranium is also up there on the critical metals list as well for the U.S.
It's a
So.
key factor.
Hmm.
So along with battery metals and other important commodities, it's going to be a very critical factor moving forward.
Right. But so why then seal the Apex, historical mine? Because I believe they when did that happen? It was not too long ago that they like completely sealed it off.
Most of that is for recreational protection. Most of these projects on BLM and U.S. Forest Service ground, they're used by recreational users, campers, backpackers, even ranchers, right? So
Hmm.
leaving open mine workings is just a public safety issue. So they go out, they grade up the mines, they lock off the adits so that you don't have the case where I think it actually just recently happened near Las Vegas. A couple motorcyclists fell into an open mine shaft and passed away. So they're just taking steps to make sure that the public is safe while we evaluate and move forward with these historical assets.
Cyclists, man, I don't know what to tell you about them. I can tell you a lot because I'm one of them, but I've heard worse. But anyways, it's is there cattle grazing on all of your projects? I mean, Nevada and Utah.
Not all of them, but on select properties, yes.
Okay, good. So how does that work? How do you deal with them? Like, is it just open for them to go there, or do you have some type of an agreement with them?
You work alongside the ranchers through the BLM, so it's all administered through the Bureau of Land Management. They lease that land out to grazers and farmers to use that seasonally,
Hmm.
and we go in and make sure that we're addressing demands or needs of the ranchers and the BLM at the same time, so that everybody can operate kind of coincidentally.
Hmm. But that's not like a main thing that you have to deal with. Also, in terms of costs, I don't expect it's something major.
There's no real cost associated with that besides making sure fences are kept in place and you're not hindering other operations.
All right, good, good. All right, and well, you're now drilling that property, the Apex property that I was talking about, that the historic mine was sealed off there. And you also call this one your flagship asset, but again, you're not the first one to try your luck there. Um,
No.
what has been done on the property since the 70s? Because I believe the 70s is the last time it was drilled, or was it drilled after that as well?
It was drilled in 2011 as well.
Mm.
The issue being that in Nevada, well, quite a few states actually, filing of information is not the same as it is in Saskatchewan or in Canada across the board. So most of that information was lost, and unfortunately, operators now in modern times have to go back and duplicate a lot of the previous efforts.
Hmm.
But what we've done since then is flown additional geophysical surveys to really build up our understanding of the subsurface geology. And what we found is that, yes, the more recent operators in 2011, they did try to expand Apex to the west. But unfortunately, what they came across is that they didn't understand there was structural displacement that moved the geological trend away from where they were drilling. Now that we understand that and we know, we can better target our upcoming drilling and our current drilling to make sure that we maximize our targeting efforts to have the best chance of finding new mineralization.
Hmm. How do you know where those holes are though, from the 70s or from the
We
2011?
know where they are, but they just don't have any information from them. They're caller locations for the most part.
Okay. How close to those historic drill holes are you drilling?
About 700 meters. Just shifted away again off on the structural displacement rather than just following the trend across to the west.
Right. So I mean, pretty much nothing to do with those historical drilling.
Not much, no.
No. Okay. And how far are you up that program right now? Because you started what, a month ago. How many meters do you get done per shift?
I think right now we're sitting about 900 meters total for the program. So we're
Okay.
moving ahead nicely, making good production. We definitely took our time at the start of this one to maximize core recovery. Something that's typical of uranium mineralization is that a lot of it is hosted within very soft, altered clay rocks or
Mm.
clay minerals. So if you're not careful, you wash that away and just kind of displace any proof of the mineralization downhole. So we're taking our time, making sure we're doing it right.
Right. Okay. But so what? You're nearly halfway there. Um, I mean, almost half. Let's say 40% within that 2200 drill program that you started
Yep.
what, less than a month ago. So what are you thinking? Get it done before the end of January?
Hoping to get the majority of it done here before Christmas and then shut down for Christmas break and kick things back off as required following that.
Okay, right. Because you're working with people, they got to take breaks for Christmas. I always forget that part because the only person I work with is my wife, and she doesn't get any breaks for Christmas.
That's
But
fair enough.
so, how long is it going to take for you to get the results back? And so first of all, are you sending those up to Vancouver for assays, or and when do you get them
Nope,
back?
that all sticks. That all stays within Nevada. We're doing it locally. We've had pretty great service providers so far in our geochemical assaying, so we'll stick with the groups that we're with.
Hmm. Okay. Good. So
So
what?
honestly, I think we could have a 3 to 4 week turnaround for all of our assays on the property.
Okay. Good. Well, so if you're done by the end of January, what are you thinking? Assay results before the end of February?
Well, before that, yeah,
Okay.
for anything
Good.
taken from the property, yeah.
Good. Well, you mentioned something about the geology here that was interesting to me. I made a note. Can you expand a little bit more in the geology? Because when I open up the map and I look around in a radius of what 30 to 50 kilometers, something like that, there's mainly gold projects in Nevada. And Nevada is really known for those deep, deep rooted Carlin style gold deposits. So yeah, what exactly are you looking for here, and why does that give you the confidence that you'll find it, given that typically deposits around you are different?
Well, you know what? Honestly, exploration for high-grade uranium in the United States hasn't been very extensive. Yes, there's been a lot of exploration for uranium, but not in the same fashion that we explore for it in the Athabasca Basin. It's something that's kind of been looked over, where people are typically looking for ISR type deposits or deep underground deposits, but not conventional high-grade uranium. So something unique that we saw at the Apex mine is that the uranium mineralization is very closely associated with a very distinct graphitic and sulfidic alteration zone.
Hmm.
That's something we see in the Athabasca Basin. It's a great corridor or reduction environment for uranium deposition and mineralization. But what we wanted to know is if the trend actually moved across the entire mountain range, and hence why we flew our VTEM survey at the end of last year to see if that conductive signature carried across the property. To our delight, it does travel across the entire 17.5 kilometer trend of the property, shows us a very nice, very distinct contact between the intrusive Austin Pluton and the Jurassic metasediments, which give us a great contact for deposition on the property. And now that we know we have that continuous trend with two past producing mines being Apex and Lowboy on opposite ends of the property, we're trying to apply the mentality of looking for pearls on a string, as we call it in the Athabasca Basin, where along that mineralized corridor, you can find continuous zones of mineralization across that 17.5 kilometer trend. If we can prove that up, we can apply that to multiple of our projects in Nevada and really build out a new exploration mentality for the jurisdiction.
So you don't think it's going to be sort of dispersed? You think it's going to be more concentrated in pods, if you will, along a
Yes.
given strike length?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're looking for. And based on the surface radiometrics and the continuous prospecting we're doing on the property, we are seeing surface mineralization across that 17.5 kilometer extent.
What's the space between the two historical workings that you just mentioned?
About 10 kilometers roughly.
Okay, okay.
So plenty of room. And I think the property, like that trend is roughly 95% undrill tested.
Hmm. Do you have an idea of from historical workings what mineralization is hosted in? Because I don't imagine it's so in the basin. For background to listeners, it's uraninite, which is basically uranium. What is it hosted in Utah?
Is some primary mineralization, so uraninite on the property, but most of it is autunite, coffinite, other secondary uranium minerals.
Hmm.
So secondary enrichment along that contact between the intrusive and the Jurassic metasediments.
How does is that what you think the majority will be hosted in?
Most likely, yeah.
Hmm. How does metallurgy work on that?
Again, metallurgy is not my strong point by any stretch, but looking forward into processing, we did have a study done in 2022 that looked at heap leach as an initial processing technique on the property. And heap leach has been very successful with up to 95% recovery for those uranium minerals in the
Hmm.
past. So that would be something that we look at as we try to build out that larger hub and spoke mining model, as you mentioned earlier, using either Apex or Hearts Point as the hub of a larger model.
Mm, right, right. And I also saw that those are the forward-looking statements that I talked about at the beginning. But I also saw that mineralization, your other project, so Garfield Hills, starts right at the sort of the layer of basalt. How do you even pronounce that?
Yeah,
Anyways,
basalt. Yeah, it's a
basalt.
flood
Yeah, there you
basalt
go.
that kind of capped all the rest of the geology. So
Mm,
it's more or less uninteresting that portion, but once we punch through it right at that horizon where we get into the sedimentary layers and the meta sediments underneath that, that continuous zone is mineralized.
mm. Is that what you're seeing at Apex, right? I mean, if you can tell me about the video of whatever you're seeing in the core right now, because I assume you've seen photos or whatever of the core that's coming out. Is that the same? Like, is it covered with basalt as well?
No, so Apex is very similar in the emplacement of the uranium mineralization, where a granitic pluton came up underneath. And at that contact between the pluton and the metasediments, that's where the mineralization occurs. The only difference is that at Garfield Hills, we have a flood basalt that came out afterwards and covered the area. So Apex is different, where most of the mineralization starts at or near surface with no cap.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. At Garfield Hills, what does it start? How far did it, I mean, how deep did it start?
Some of it is at surface, with the deepest intersection starting at about 100 meters.
Mm, okay. Good. Good, good, good. This is a good overview, by the way, geological. So thank you. What does success look like for this road program at Apex? Like, what goals have you set for yourself?
Really just the confirmation of continuity of mineralization. Exploration is about gaining more information, right? We're trying to figure out a puzzle subsurface based on limited information. So really any more information about that geological trend, continuity of that graphitic alteration zone, and of course, looking for the uranium mineralization, anything that we see over 0.1% is success to us. 0.1% is high grade as far as worldwide standards, and that's kind of the benchmark we're looking for.
Mm. So you're thinking of connecting these two, and as long as the holes between them are mineralized, you're going to say this is a success. Let's move this forward into a phase two.
Yes.
Okay. So what could phase two look like? Again, forward looking,
Well,
but
phase two is actually planned to be on the U.S. Forest Service portion of the Apex property. So
mm,
we are completing the required benchmark surveys for the U.S. Forest Service right now, and we do expect to have that wrapped up by Q2 of 2024. And we would like to roll back onto the property at that time and kick off drilling around the historic Apex mine. As I said, there's a non-compliant resource around that portion of the property. And we'd be looking to bring that into more closely of a compliant state and use that as a foundation to explore the rest of the property.
right. And what part of that? What part of the property is that? Because if I look at where the historical mine is, that's sort of in the northwestern part of the
That'll
land
be
package.
immediately surrounding the historic mine.
Oh, okay. So in that part. So what's happening at the how does the other end of the land package look like? Is it similar, and do you have any plans or any drill targets there?
We have drill targets across the property. There's actually probably more than we can tackle
Mm,
immediately. But what we're doing right now is actually pursuing 3 permits at the same time on the U.S. Forest Service ground. You have to go through the same benchmarking studies, but then that way, again, we can leapfrog one to the next so that we're always active on the property.
okay. And that's something you want to keep doing yourself, or is the potential for getting a strategic partner or something like an optionee to sort of help you finance that? Yeah, how do you look at that? Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want to do it with a partner?
At the moment, we're content doing it by ourselves. But uranium in a bull market is one of the most exciting commodities you can be part of. We've been approached pretty aggressively over the past few months now for merger opportunities, for financing opportunities, for
Mm,
full acquisitions, partial acquisitions, pretty much anything you can think of. So I'm always willing to have those conversations. But for the time being, based on our positioning in the market, the valuation of the company, I think it's better off for us to stretch our legs, build some value for the company, and then entertain those options later next year.
mm. But still, the idea to potentially entertain those options at a different value is still there.
Absolutely.
Mm. Okay. Are you using the same contractor, drilling contractor for all of your Nevada projects, by the way?
As of recently, yes, the drilling contractor for our Garfield Hills property didn't work out for us, so we moved on to a different one, and we're having great luck with the current provider.
And that's one drill at Apex currently.
Yes.
Okay, so how much are you paying per meter?
I think right now the most recent number I got from my VPX was about 175 US per meter.
Hmm. It's good because it's shallow, I suppose. So,
Yep.
okay. Well, what I'm trying to figure out here is how much money do you have? How far does it get you? You've got 4 million in the bank. It obviously gets you through Apex and through Garfield. But if
Apex
there
and Hart's
was,
Point, it should push us through. So we do plan, like I said, to kick off drilling at Hart's Point, hopefully by second week of January. So
hmm,
our current financing situation will move us through the rest of this Apex drilling, through the Hart's Point drilling, and into next year.
okay, okay. And then Huber Hills, we didn't say much about that, but you mentioned in presentation
Beaver
that you want
Hills,
to start a phase one drilling in 2024. Do you have something more specific that you can share with me?
Yeah, for sure. So on our Nevada properties, because they are near and at surface mineralization, very conventional style, we start off with a baseline radiometric and magnetic survey to build up our geological understanding of the property. So we still have to kick that off at Huber Hills. It's very early stage. So we're going to start off with that, build up our understanding of the property, as I said, and then look to do a phase one drilling program later next year.
Okay. Later next year, that's H2, or is it sort of like Q4 even?
Second half for sure. It all depends on how the rest of the properties come together.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
and of course, we're always looking at new acquisition opportunities, new staking opportunities. So by then, the properties that we have could have doubled. So we'll see how the year plays out. But we're always aggressively looking at new opportunities for the company to build value.
I do want to talk about that for sure. But just before we move on to that point, as far as I understand it, priority goes as follows. Apex currently being drilled, halfway, nearly halfway done. Hearts Point, you're hoping to restart soon, so that's sort of your second priority. Garfield potentially next year, and then Huber comes towards the second part of next year. Is that sort of the priority? Am I getting it correctly?
Exactly. Yep. No,
Okay.
that's perfect.
And well, let's do talk about strategy here, Matt, because you say in your presentation that you have a let me quote that here. You have a vision to grow your portfolio of projects within a proven selection of criteria for success, unquote. And so one of those criteria on here is tier one jurisdictions. So it's basically looking at good jurisdictions, but that can mean different things to different people, right? So what would you or what would the team consider a tier one jurisdiction? What's that dependent on?
Well, first off, geological potential. That's the first thing we look for. Proven mining jurisdictions. Second, permitting. Wherever we can find an area that is going to have minimized permitting delays. And third, sometimes being also just as important as the first two, is an area where we're not going to encounter sociopolitical issues that are going to slow down or stop our projects.
Hmm.
Perfect example being the current issues in Niger. The European Union previously relied on Niger for 25% of their uranium imports. So issues like that are very prevalent in our industry and things that we always have to keep in mind. So those are the three main criteria that we look for and why we're focused on the areas that we are focused on right now.
When you say geological potential, can we maybe expand on that? Because again, that could mean different things to different people. Is it specifically because we started off by you telling me that you like brownfield projects that have not gotten that have not that were not allowed to peak because of circumstances. So what does geological potential mean to you? Is it brownfield assets? Do you want, yeah, blue sky potential? What do you want?
A bit of all of it, honestly. Of course, as geologists, we look at past producing jurisdictions as the easiest first step in finding new mineralization or even greenfields exploration. We look at those areas and we look at areas that look like they were untapped around them. So it's kind of a combination. Yes, we're going in to build up the previous resources that were left behind, but also looking for new discoveries along those trends, using the information that we have, the experience that we've gained in other jurisdictions, and applying that to where we are now.
But you sort of
If that makes
crossed
sense.
off Niger. Like, well, you gave it as an example, but
No,
is it like
no,
completely off limits?
it's just an example as a political risk, right? So I've worked in Africa as well. I've had been on projects that had great potential and were shut down just because of heightened political issues, because of military problems, etc. And those are just reasons that cause shareholders uncertainty, right? And we want to avoid that. We want to maximize our shareholders' faith in us as we move forward. And by avoiding areas that could potentially face those problems, I think we're accomplishing that.
But where do you go then? I mean, we for some reason don't want you over here in Europe still. I hope we're going to wake up too one day. But for now, at least, it seems like we don't want you here over in Europe. Um, Africa is uncertain, as you said, or at least some of the jurisdictions there. So you've got Canada and the US left, basically.
I think the US has great potential. As I said, it's never really been explored in the same ways that we've explored the Athabasca Basin. So once we prove up this exploration model that we're looking for at Apex, I think it opens doors to go back and look at properties that did have discoveries from the 1940s to the 1970s and again didn't reach their peak. And not just looking at those properties, but looking at the geological terrains around them. If you see that mineralization potential at one part of a mountain range, there's no reason that it can't be stacking sequences along that mountain range over and over again. So we're just opening the door here now. I think that once we prove this up, there's going to be a lot more interest in trying to repeat that success and move forward with the same exploration model in across the United States.
Well, so basically, there is high probability for you to remain sort of a American uranium for uraniums type of, whoa, American uranium for Americans type of story yourself. Is that what you?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah. If we
okay.
see great potential elsewhere, I won't say that we're not going to branch out, but it makes sense to us right now. The
Hmm.
United States has a great case for needing uranium. They have great geological potential to build up additional resources and move forward with production. So I think we're perfectly situated where we are right now.
Hmm. Okay. I just made up a new word, which is uraniums, which is apparently people who are interested in uranium, which is kind of nice. Um, but what I'm thinking here though is why even bother looking for new projects? I mean, you already have four of them. That is plenty of ground. You told me you like all of them. Drilling is not the cheapest thing in the world, obviously, in either of the two jurisdictions. So drilling all the project at the same time will probably be challenging in terms of capital markets and whatnot, especially given how explorers have been treated recently. So why even go look for other projects before having something material on the four projects that you have on your hands right now?
Time and place. Small cap companies like ours really fit a niche position in the market and in the industry overall. Generally speaking, major companies and mid cap companies don't make discoveries. They acquire assets, they bring them into production, and they service that supply gap. Junior companies like ours, we're the ones who go out into the market and we de-risk projects. We put together portfolios that can more or less restock the shelves of mid caps and majors once they kick off production on their current assets. A lot of them don't even have exploration teams. They have a select group of assets that they've acquired through whatever means. And once they kick them off and bring them back into production, they need a reliable source of properties and projects that have been de-risked and brought into a near production state so that they can continue forward with their momentum.
Hmm. Okay,
So
and
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, okay, so what does that mean for you? I mean, I guess I get that part, but what does it mean for you specifically?
The more assets that we bring in of value, as long as we're very selective using the same criteria we've used moving forward, it just builds value for our company down the road. Where once these mid cap companies are looking to again restock those shelves, we have more potential than our competitors.
But that is capital dependent. Like, I mean, it
Of
depends on
course.
you having access to let's not call it cheap capital because it's never really cheap for the explorers, but to capital that makes sense to be raised.
Yes and no. A lot of these opportunities could be very cheap as staking opportunities, same as we
Hmm,
did with Huber Hills, where we
sure.
don't actually have to make an acquisition. We can build value through a very cheap staking opportunity due to information that was missed by our competitors on, again, historic projects. These projects have uh, both good and bad been lost to time, and sometimes we find them in a banker's box in the back of some geologist's garage that have been ignored for 50 years. So it's all about our due diligence and how aggressively we want to go after these opportunities.
Hmm.
They don't need to be expensive.
That's a good point. There's a friend of mine who's currently working on a private deal that they're getting from some old lady that basically got it from her late husband, who got it from his brother, and she didn't even know she had it. They had some kind of a
Exactly.
shack that was full of core, and like these things actually happen. It's almost like a movie, but it's a good
Quite
point.
often.
Yeah. What are the holding costs, by the way? Because for the Nevada assets.
Quite minimal. It's just a set amount per year per claim. I think our Apex is the most expensive, and I think the holding cost is about 120 grand a year for the 6,000 hectares that we have.
That's the most expensive one. It's also the biggest
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. And so why I'm asking this because I want to go back to that $4 million in cash. It gets you to, what did you tell me? It gets you through 2024 for sure.
It'll get us to the middle of 2024 for sure.
Hmm.
Again, depending how aggressive we want to be, based on market conditions, but it'll get us into mid 2024, I
Hmm.
would say.
So you don't need to take capital. Um, but they always say take the money when it's there, not when you need it.
Take it when it's there. based on certain things. Again, our stock's been pretty beaten up over the past 12 months. So based on the fact that we're now finally getting out there drilling our two flagship properties, I think this really is the time for us to stretch our legs, build some value, and then reconsider those options in the coming months.
So what I'm getting from this, to tell me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of feeling that I'm getting is no cap raise before you have assay results, basically.
Until we get some kind of results to move forward, yes.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was straightforward. I appreciate it.
You're
How's
welcome.
G&A, Matt, for 2023? How's it looking, and how is it going to grow into 2024, given that you might be ramping up activities and drilling two projects at the same time?
I think we're really well positioned. We've got everything that we need right now. And moving forward with two projects is not going to be a concern. I think we have the right team behind us. We've got the right financial position, and the market is starting to respond. I know small caps are always the last ones to the party, to be quite honest. You've seen the mid caps start responding a lot more over the past 12 months, climbing back into the same framework they were in, 12 to 15 months ago. And we'll get there. Seeing the market starting to climb that spot price back over $80 right now, which is the best we've seen since early 2011. I really see an exciting year ahead of us.
Right. I was asking for the G&A. So how much money are you spending per month, basically, to keep the lights on?
It's minimal, honestly. Our burn rate right now is it's a little over maybe six figures a month. So quarterly, we're looking at about 1.5 million at
Okay.
worst.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Again, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
work with that $4 million figure in my head. How's the G&A split, by the way, between well, suppose it's office, marketing, and paychecks. How's it split between those three things?
Well, that's a good question. Marketing depends. We kind of push when we need to, turn it off when we don't have to.
Hmm.
We're very minimal. We use a group out of Vancouver, King Communications, to manage all of our marketing and IR efforts. They're fantastic. I've worked with them all the way back to Hathor. They worked with Hathor, with NextGen. They currently work with ISO and with ourselves. So they manage that side of things. Salary, we only have 3 employees, so we're trying to keep a small group as best as possible to minimize expense. Use contractors where we can because when we don't need them, we don't use them. And then administrative costs, again, very, very minimal. We all work remotely. So really the big expense for our company is exploration. And that's why I say up to a maximum of about 1.5 million per quarter, because when we kick in exploration efforts, that's when things start to get expensive.
Hmm. And you've got three employees on the payroll. That's, well, I suppose CEO. Who else?
Myself, our VP exploration, and our senior geologist.
Okay. Okay. Do you off the top of your head, do you know what those numbers are?
Not in total, but it'll be in our financial statements.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't print out the management information circular. Okay, so three people, three employees. But what are you doing in terms of market? So that the you mentioned the group out of Vancouver. You basically give them a budget and they take care of roadshows, conferences, and everything else, or like how does that work?
More or less, yeah. They're very dedicated. They're the ones who are on the call, on the phone calls every single day, setting up meetings for me. I'm pretty consistently active, giving interviews and presentations. I'd say
Hmm.
probably 3 to 4 a week. But besides that, we select our conferences quite carefully. We've tried kind of a different selection over the past year to see which ones worked, which ones didn't. I've taken a new approach now of whenever I go to a conference to at least do a 1 day roadshow in the area I'm in as well. We saw a great response last time. I went down to Florida last month.
Hmm.
We did a 1 day roadshow, then went to the Capital Events Management Conference down in Florida. And over those 3 days, we went from our typical trading volume to, I think, 3 days of 700,000, 1.5 million, and 800,000 back to back, just based on the local interest. So I think it's proving itself in the approach that we're taking. We do get the response when I get out there. And now that I do have a VPX and a senior geologist to take over the operations from me, it gives me the opportunity to actually get in front of people, talk about the story of our company, and market the way that I should have been from the beginning.
Hmm.
So
How often do you visit the projects now?
I try to make it down to the projects at least once through every exploration program, whether it's geophysical prospecting or drilling. I try to get down there once because, again, I am a geologist by education. I do like that I am able to help guide the team. and give them valuable input where needed. But yeah, I definitely like to be boots on the ground. If I don't believe in the project and the property and the assets, then I have a hard time selling them. So
Hmm,
you can take that away from this, that I do believe in everything that we have down there in the United States right now.
right. How are you find is this by the way your first CEO position that you're taking?
Publicly, yes. I've at this point in my career, I've founded or been part of 7 startups.
Hmm.
Five of those were quite successful. So I've been the president of two other companies, but they were private companies.
Okay. What is it? Startups? All in the resource space, or have you done something else?
No, all resource. So it's either consulting or resource based, one of the two. But again, the
Nice.
consulting was in natural resources.
Okay. Well, why I'm asking you this is because I'm just wondering how are you finding, presenting, going out to road shows as a CEO as opposed to going as, a VP of X or just a geologist who comes along to talk about the geology. How are you finding, how are you managing that difference?
I think it was an easy transition, really, from selling the services of a consulting company to, do the things that we're doing right now, transitioning to selling the merits of a junior company. It really wasn't that much of a stretch for me. And I've definitely got the benefit of, being able to lean on our chairman, Garrett Ainsworth, who's been very successful in uranium in his own rights, both as VPX, as CEO multiple times over now. Definitely leaning on him for more knowledge on the capital market side of things. I have a great team behind me, and like I said, it really gives me the opportunity to stretch my legs on the marketing side, and it's something I've always had a knack for. So
Hmm. Why I ask you that is because I recently came back from a conference where I met one of the companies I work closely with, who recently had their chief geologist upgraded to CEO. And so I
yeah,
asked him, how are you finding, how is it different? He said that he gets quite a lot more tired because you normally, as a chief geologist, you're really only talking about the geology. When the conversation starts being focused on the capital markets, you start ignoring it because you don't really care about that. You care about the rocks. But as a CEO, you have to care about everything and you have to pay attention to everything. So that's what he told me.
absolutely. No, I understand that completely, and for some people, it is a tough shift to make, but you know what? I think it's a natural progression for anybody who wants to become a bigger part of their company in this space. So
Course, yeah. And in terms of marketing, go back to roadshows and conferences, stuff like that. You said you're going down to Florida. Is that where, because this is an American story that I think Americans will have an easier time understanding than something, way up north in the basin or something like that. Is that where your marketing efforts are also concentrated right now?
becoming that way, yes. I
Hmm.
earlier on with the company, a lot of our marketing efforts were focused in Canada, and I think we were kind of missing the mark on that. So we've
Hmm.
definitely shifted to spending a lot more time and effort in the United States because it is a U.S. story. We're trying to bridge the gap and create a more reliable supply chain for uranium in the United States. And Americans are quite patriotic. They understand that. They understand the demand for it, and I think they're responding quite well.
Yeah, especially in Florida. But again, American uranium for Americans. That's sort of the whole
Exactly.
vibe that I'm getting from conversation so far. So that's
Yep.
good. You are listed on the CSE though. Not the favorite stock exchange for Canadians, but also definitely not for Americans because there's also some restrictions on there. Do you have any plans of changing that?
We're also listed on the OTCQB right now, but definitely considering uplisting to the TSXV. It's something we've chatted about for a little while now, but again, until our share performance is doing a little bit better, I think we can hold off on that on the additional listing fees and push through, build some more value for the company, as I mentioned, and then look at that into 2024.
Hmm. Okay. Do you have any like I assume the TSX or I think I remember the TSXV is a little bit more expensive than the CSE, but it's
It
probably not
is.
material.
No, it's not. It's not enough to worry about too much. It's just we want to focus on getting some results right now. Put our efforts there. Make sure that we're maximizing value on our drilling programs, and then look towards additional things. Like I said, uplisting next year.
Right. Okay. Because why I'm asking this because I'm thinking who are you going to place the shares with during your next capital raise? As in, like, if you're doing it in a private placement, obviously you can place it with whoever you want. But oftentimes, when I'm talking to people again about some of the companies I work with more closely, they would ask me about liquidity, and after 4 months and one day they want to sell, they want to have enough liquidity. And so who do you want to place those shares with next time you raise money? Do you have like a target of, I want to do 60% institutionals, or I want to bring in more retail? Like who are you targeting for those shares?
Well, that's a good question. It's not really a topic that we had discussed at length yet because we're holding off on a financing.
Hmm.
But it would definitely be beneficial to, I think, have a larger institutional base next time around. I
Hmm.
think that would definitely help. We've had a loyal group of shareholders so far, a couple anomalies to that statement, but our larger and strategic shareholders have been quite loyal. All financed or primarily financed through Claris last time on our $11 million financing. But great support through the other groups who are shareholders in our company, especially one of our larger shareholders, Michael Gentili. He speaks very highly of us, and he believes in the story that we have behind the company. So again, to answer the original question, I think a larger institutional base would be helpful, but
Hmm.
we'll see when we get to that point.
But Michael Gentile, having mentioned him, you do expect him to keep coming back and keep topping up his ownership during financings.
I can hope so.
Okay. That's literally the only answer you can give me, by the way, for people
Yeah.
listening. But good point. What about insiders? Insider ownership, as I mentioned, insiders and directors. What is it? 22%, I believe.
Yep. I think I hold just under 3%. Our chairman holds 3.5% of the company. So as I said earlier, I believe in the assets that we have, but we also stand behind the company as shareholders. So
Right. Right. Well, you believe in the assets that you have. The market has also punished you in the meanwhile. It sounds like a buying opportunity. Insider buying in the open market hasn't really happened a whole lot this year. How come?
oh that's a good question. Um, Personally, I'm going through a nasty divorce right now, so my finances are tied up. But yeah, besides that, Garrett does participate in purchasing some shares occasionally, and I think some of our board does as well, just not nearly as often.
Hmm. I'm sorry to hear that, by the way, and I appreciate
That's
your
okay.
your honesty there.
Honest question, so honest answer.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate this whole conversation. I think we've gone through a lot. I have taken down a lot of notes, went through a bunch of the stuff that I printed out. Is there something that you came here hoping to talk about, but I'm failing to bring up?
No, Antonio, I think you really covered the bases well right out of the gates of this conversation, and really highlighted some of the key points of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and allowed me the opportunity to stress why we're approaching our projects the way we are. So I think this has been quite comprehensive.
Right. Okay. And then one last thing, I'm gonna make you pick your favorite child out of the four that you have. What's your favorite project?
Um, I'm going to say Hearts Point
Okay. How come?
because of the upside potential. It's not a past producer like the previous three, but it is very de-risked through the historic oil and gas drilling on the property, showing off-scale radioactivity in those three logs across the property with a 5 kilometer strike length, and the fact that we are sitting uh, right in the center of the Colorado Plateau, which has produced almost 600 million pounds since the 1950s. Again, the proximity to Lisbon Valley, and the fact that when I visited the property last time, now all I had to do was drive down into the valley west of our property, take a scintillometer against the canyon wall, and hit 35,000 CPS on my scint
Mm. And
within
post a
five
video
minutes of
of it on
looking at it.
Twitter.
So I'm very excited about that property. I'm very excited about the upside potential, and making a new discovery to move forward with.
Is the Colorado Plateau not called the Athabasca Basin of the U.S. or something like that? I might have seen. Is that I'm thinking
That's
right?
that's its nickname exactly.
Okay.
So.
Well, why is it geologically is it formed in the same way?
Not quite. No, it's not. It is a sedimentary basin,
Hmm.
well, sedimentary formation, but it's just due to the production. 600 million pounds since the 1950s is one of the largest producing areas in the world
Hmm. So
with a lot of untapped potential.
how deep are the sediments there?
So the formation we're looking at right now is 400 meters. But to put that in perspective, Lisbon Valley, 30 kilometers to the east, was producing at 850 meters all the way up until 1989 at the same production grade we're looking at. So half the depth should make it far more economic than the previous operations in the area.
What are they? So it's a sediment-hosted uranium
Yes,
deposit,
very flat
basically.
lying, very simple geology, and spectacular grades. We
Mm.
expect to see, again, looking at the formations, I would be surprised if we drilled those holes and didn't get 10 meters at 0.1%.
And what kind of minerals are we talking about? What is it hosted in?
So again, it's in a sandstone unit. I'm not sure of the specific uranium minerals because we haven't done any assaying on the property, but I would expect to see some primary mineralization in that as well.
Mm. What do you think would be comparables around the world? Sandstone, the African deposits?
Um, Again, seeing that we're only focused on one formation within the sedimentary column, even some of the Nevada deposits would be quite similar.
Mm.
Garfield Hills would be pretty similar as well. The only difference being there's an unconformity at the contact as well.
Not the case here, as you mentioned. Is
No,
there a layer of basalt as well?
no, it's straight sediments from surface right down to our target formation.
So well, like Garfield, but much simpler.
Yeah, because you don't have the hard basalt to get through.
Right,
Correct.
right. Okay. Yeah, this is a good point. Good tidbit sort of here at the end. Yeah, again, I don't think I have any other questions. Anything else that you wanted to add here in the end?
No, I think that wraps it up quite well. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, Antonio.
And I appreciate you sitting down with me. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Look forward to talking again soon.